All right, so today we begin with Shemot, or Exodus, chapter 23, verse 22. Now, literally in English it says, "For if hear, shall hear, and do you all that I will speak, and enemy me, enemies you, and adversaries me, adversaries you." Pretty cool, huh? All right, so it starts off with ki, the Hebrew word ki, which means if, for, or because. It's used in all those ways. Remember, this is a primitive language, and in primitive languages, you have few words with lots of meaning, whereas modern abstract languages like English, they have many words with little meaning. It would seem like there's many words with lots of meaning in the dictionary, but when you really pick out the actual meaning that's set behind a word, they're not really telling you a lot. Okay, so then the next word is im, which is also an if. It's sometimes used for lo, or behold, or truly, or certainly. It's a demonstrative, interrogative, a conditional particle. Anyway, the next word is shamoa. It's from here, shema. It's that word. So remember, in Hebrew, in biblical Hebrew, I should say, it's very important that I say that, because modern Hebrew, not so much. But although if you're from Israel and live in Israel, you may feel differently about what I just said. But anyway, in biblical Hebrew, for sure, to hear is to hear with your ears. You had to hear it. But remember, you can hear with your eyes. What? How's that possible? Well, you read something and you understood it, you perceived it, that means you heard it ish. That's at least that part of it. That takes care of the hearing with the ears. But then you have to understand it, right? In a book and not understand it. I mean, think about how many people read an English Bible and just skip over all kinds of stuff because it doesn't make sense. And there's lots of books you do that with. You can do that with Shakespeare. You can do that with Edgar Allan Poe, especially. You know, if you don't know the history and the culture behind the stuff they said, generally you really don't understand it. We used to have a professor when we were in college, when Don and I went to college together, that uh, it was Edgar Allan Poe, wasn't it, that she took us through and explained? Yeah. Donna doesn't even remember. Donna was a little jealous of the girl. She thought that I was going to run off with her or something. Is that right? She's like, oh, I was hoping. Anyway, so she'd give us all the custom and the culture behind it, and the stuff would finally make some sense in a way that, you know, it was never possible for it to make sense before. One of them little things that set me on the path that I'm on today, right? So anyway, you had to understand it, because it doesn't do you any good if you don't understand it. Then you have to act upon it. Now, the acting on it does not have to be in the positive. It can be in the negative. So if I say, I'm thirsty, well, you've heard that. You understand that that means I probably want something to drink or could use something to drink, right? So, but if you sit there like a bump on a log and don't say or do anything, in biblical Hebrew, you didn't hear. There has to be an action. So if you say, well, get off your lazy tuchus and go get you something to drink, did you not? Even though it's a little negative from my point of view, you still responded. So you did all three. You heard with your ears, you understood it with your mind, and then you acted upon it. On the other, on the other hand, you could have gotten up, walked in the kitchen, and grabbed a cup of water and handed it to me. You know, there's the response is not nearly as important. Whether it's positive or negative is not nearly as important as the fact that there needs to be a response. Now, when this word is used in biblical text, especially in the portion of the law where we're reading, the main thing is that you hear it with your ears, you understand it with your heart, and you obey it. And this is one of the reasons why when you read an English Bible, you can lay a bunch of them down side by side, and one of them may say here in this verse, and the next one may say understand, and then the next one may say obey. They're all correct. But what they try to do is give you one word for one word. They try real hard not to, they don't want to, every time this word Shema shows up in any of its forms, they don't want to say hear, understand, and obey, right? Because they're afraid that we're adding to the word of God. Well, no, if you were writing it in Hebrew, that would be adding to it to stretch it out that way. But in English, you pretty much have to if they're going to understand it, or at least you have to teach them the rule, right? Anyway, there's your word. Then it's Tishma. That's Shama. They put the tate sound in front of it to be you shall hear. So you're going to hear, understand, and obey, and you shall hear, understand, and obey, right? So they're making it really, really important. You're absolutely going to have to do this. The kolo. Well, the word is kol. The base word here is kol, and that's voice. And then they put the bait in front of it, so it's in or with, and then they put the O at the end of it, which makes it's either he or it's it. There are people that will tell you that the word it doesn't exist in Hebrew, but it does. They say because Hebrew is a gender specific language, they have a masculine word for it and a feminine word for it. The masculine means he, and the feminine means she. So instead of saying it like we do, our word for it is gender neutral. So we use one word regardless of whether you're talking about women or men. But in Hebrew, it's not that way. So they'll say he or they'll say she, literally, right? But it means it in its voice, or with its voice in this case. Or it could be a he. If we're talking about if it is in the masculine, we are talking about a person, like if they were saying, listen to the sound of Moshe's voice, then they would have put the masculine in there indicating his voice, right? So that's why it's a little difficult sometimes to understand. But it really is we should think of it as the word it, but it's also used for the word he and the feminine for the word she. All right, so anyway, our word here is kol, it's the voice. And it's whether it's of animals or men, it doesn't make any difference. It's this because it's of the sound that's being made. It's of crying out, whether in joy or sorrow, it doesn't matter. Either in speaking or of God, they say the thunder was the sound of God to proclaim or to utter something, to make noise. Water makes noise, so that's the sound of water. Wind can make noise, it's the sound of wind, right? So it's of the sound. Then it's ba'asita, and that's from the word asa, to do properly, to uh, labor, to work about anything, to make, to produce by labor, to manufacture, to fabricate. And so they fabricate things like ships, altars, even bricks. When you're going to manufacture or fabricate a building, you have to manufacture or fabricate the bricks. Now you don't have to manufacture the wood, the trees do that, right? But then you do have to fabricate the wood, cutting it up, making 2x4s, 2x6s, and so on. You have to fabricate that part of it, but the wood itself is not fabricated. Hopefully you're getting the idea of that word. So that's the word we usually generally just boil it down to the word do, D-O. I will do this. Because if I say I will, or you can use the word make. Make or do are the two most common words. I will make a house. I will do the work. There you go. Because in doing it or making it, you're doing a whole lot of fabricating, right? Then they have the word kol. Now, this is a sound alike. A while ago, the word kol was sound or voice. I thought it was interesting in the Sixth Sense, the little boy who gave voice, gave utterance to the who couldn't speak. outside their world to our world, his name was Cole. I'm pretty sure there was a Jew involved in the writing of that show. I'm just saying. There was a lot of little Jewish things in there if you knew the Hebrew language. That was one of them. But anyway, this is a sound-alike word, Cole. It's spelled differently, but it sounds the same. This means all. It's totality. So it's, you say all of my children. You say Kol Banim, all of my children, right? Then it's Asher. That or which is the English word that goes in place of that. Then we say Adaber. You hear the dabar, dabar. You hear the word? I will speak. Because when they put the aleph in the front, it becomes I will. Because the word is daber, right? But they say adaber. So I will speak. It's something that's coming, not something that's done. In our case, since it happened thousands of years ago, it's done. But when this was spoken, it was still to be done. Just saying. So it's the setting in a row, ranging in order to lead, especially to lead flocks or herds to pasture, to rule, to direct a people. You're really talking about, this is more than just talking, telling them, okay, this is the way we're going to live. This is the detailed directions. This is making sure that all of your words are in a very specific order so that the people understand you at a deeper level than just an overview. Then it says, that ayavti, and enemy me. Now remember, this is God talking. Enemy me. This is that word where you get the name Job. It's really Yov or Eov. There's your base word. It's an adversary to anyone. Someone who persecutes as if to, someone who's your enemy, someone who hates you. The original idea, Jusinius said, I believe, to be that of breathing, blowing, puffing, an idea often applied to anger and hatred. It's the idea of what he's trying to say is the idea behind it, the image behind it is the nostrils moving in and out forcibly from the hard breathing of anger and rage. That's the picture behind it, right? So he just said, and my enemies, if you will, then it says et, and that's a pointer. Oy vey, oy vey. Enemies you. It's from the same word, the Job word, right? It's the same word, but they're switching it up here. First it was my enemies, now it's your enemies. But it's the same thing. This is that zarti. And adversary. This word is to straighten, to press upon, to compress, to bind together into a bundle or a roll, to press with, to siege, to besiege a city, to urge, to press upon. Um, it can stand against you without being an enemy. Let's say one person believes that abortion is a woman's right, and the other person believes that abortion is murder. We have that in America. It's one of those really uh, controversial arguments, right? You've got people on the left and people on the right. The ones on the left say it's a woman's choice, and the ones on the right that are not what they call progressive, but the conservative right, they say, no, this is murder. Well, they can get into a very heated argument. They can, scream and yell, and one's trying to win the argument and the other's trying to win the argument, and then they can walk off and be friends afterwards, right? So this is because they're adverse in their opinions, right? But it doesn't mean that they're enemies. Hopefully I've laid that out right. So you've got the enemy, and you've got someone who's against you for whatever reason. Then it says et zorecha, and believe it or not, that's the same thing. To press, to compress, to bind up, to bind together, to lay hold. It's an adversary. So it's my adversary, your adversary, right? So what does it say? What does it all mean? Well, here's my translation of the Hebrew text. For if you hear and obey his voice, speaking of God, and do everything that I have spoken, so instead of the word it is he, I will be an enemy. Wait a minute. Why does it say his voice? Must be Moshe. What? I wrote down his voice. Yes, it should be it's because it's speaking of the Torah is where this is written, right? So it's speaking of the Torah, and it should be it's, not his. I've messed up there. So it should say, for if you hear and obey its voice, and the voice of the Torah, think about it. Remember I said that you can hear by reading the words. You can hear by somebody like me reading them to you and explaining them to you. Either way, you got to hear and obey, remember? So if you hear its voice, the voice of the Torah, and do everything that I have spoken, because the Torah is the words, it's a compilation, a great deal of it is a compilation of all the words that God spoke verbally. I will be an enemy to your enemies and an adversary to your adversaries. This is mind-blowing, people. God is saying that if you live according to the Torah, everything that you've been taught, now you can't live according to the part of the Torah that I haven't yet taught you, that you haven't yet read. You can't just go and read it either. It's got to be led by your rabbi, and that is very much according to the way the Bible teaches it. You're not supposed to go read it yourself. You're supposed to, well, I mean, it's okay to read it yourself, but you probably should go and talk to your rabbi about it, make sure that you understand it, because he's going to know a whole bunch of things that maybe you don't. At least he's supposed to. I'm just saying, he went to school an awful long time. There may be some things in there that he needs to add, like some customs and some culture and some things like that, so that you understand it properly. You're not supposed to do this on your own. It is supposed to be instructor-led. So you learn it, you hear it, you learn it, you live according to it, and when you do that, now, it doesn't say that once you know it all, you know every single law in there, and you live totally according to it, and you never ever mess up. It doesn't say any of that. It's just saying that the part that you've learned, if you'll live according to that, your enemies will be God's enemies, and your adversaries will be God's adversaries. That is incredible if you think about it. All right, let's move on to the next verse. It's a little bit longer. It's verse 23. Literally in English, it says, for he walk messenger to faces you. Oh, the messenger that was supposed, I knew that threw me off. That we're not, well, you could say metaphorically that the messenger is the Torah, or you could even say literally it's the Torah. But we are talking about God said he was going to send a messenger before them. Now, the messenger we now know from history, it was Joshua, right? Because Moshe didn't get to go, remember? He went off and died, and Yehoshua was the one that took them across to the land. But there was always going to be somebody. Yehoshua was not going to live forever. So that one that goes before you, and it goes all the way back to what I was saying about you go according to what your rabbi teaches you, right? Because that's the messenger that goes before you. But literally, everything that I say and do as a rabbi to the people should be coming from the Torah, should be based on the Torah, not everything else. Now, I'm not against everything else. I'm just saying that nothing trumps the Torah in our world. Nothing. If you want your enemies to be God's enemies and your adversaries to be God's adversaries, you better not ever let anything trump the Torah in any way, shape, or form at any time for any reason. False doctrine to do so. But so the one that goes before you, that's the one who teaches you the Torah, because literally it is the Torah. There should be. It's supposed to be the same. So he will walk, the messenger walks before your faces, and make come I you to the Emori, and to the Hiti, and to the Perizi, and to the Kenani, the Chivi and make cut off him and the Yevusi. What? Everyone's going like, what? Now, this is actually easier than the last one. So we start off with ki. That's the if, for, or because. Then it says yelech. I love this. This is my favorite Hebrew word. Of course, a while ago, that was my favorite Hebrew word. But now that we're on yelech, this is my favorite Hebrew word. Every Hebrew word is my favorite, in case you don't know. Anyway, so this is from halach. It's to go, to walk, to go along. It's you're walking along. There's, if you're going from, say, to Austin, and you're following the path there, that path has boundaries. It does, because the boundary, in your case, you're in a car, you're on the road, the boundaries, the edges of the road. You start driving off in the ditch and through people's yards and stuff like that, you're probably going to get in a lot of trouble, right? Because you got outside the boundaries. So anywhere you go, there's boundaries. Even if the boundaries are just the length of your arms, there's always boundaries. And so that's connected to the idea of boundaries, because if we live out our lives according to the Torah, then the Torah's laws, the do's and the don'ts, have set the boundaries of our lives. Here's a good example. Let's say that you're praying, this big opportunity came up, you can buy this house at like half of what it's worth. So you're like, let's pray and ask God what he wants us to do. Actually, the boundaries of what you should do are already laid out in the Torah. God says that you have to give a certain amount of your money in tithe and a certain amount in offering, and that differs from people from place to place. There's the 10% tithe on your labors, but there's also the money you have to give when you come to the feasts. There's also money that you give for your free will offerings and stuff like that. And that's why it can fluctuate from one group. One group may only ask you for 10%. Just pay the 10% of what you get. And even in that, one group will say pay 10% of the gross, which is what we say, and the other group will say pay 10% of the net. So even that breaks down. And then another group will come in and say, well, you got to give 21% of your income, because that covers the 21%, and others say 23, covers all of the other stuff. Well, in the first century, in the time of Yeshua, it was 23%. People gave 23% of their income, their offerings to God, which is why they hated the tax collectors so much, because what they would do, being the honest Jewish people they were, was they would have two bags. And in one bag, they'd have a small amount of money, and that was supposed to be the tithe on the money they made that year. And the other bigger bag was the tithe on the money they really did make that year. So they would hide the bigger bag, and when the tax collector would come to get the tax money, they'd pull out the little bag and say, this is the tithe. And so then they would get charged that amount by the Romans. Well, the Jews, who were tax collectors, like the one they called Matthew, his name was actually Levi, but the one they call, and that's in the New Testament, it calls him Levi, by the way. That's how we know that was his real name, because Matthew was not his real name. So this one called Matthew, now they don't like him. Why? Because he's Jewish, and he knows that the Jewish people do this. So when he stopped a Jew to collect the taxes, the Jew would pull out the little bag and he'd say, no, not that bag. Let's see the other one. You see what happens? So now they've just 23% of their income that they're going to go take to the synagogue, or not the synagogue, but to the temple, because the temple was still standing. And now they're being charged their taxes for Rome according to the bigger pile of money instead of the smaller pile of money. It could shove them to almost 50% taxation. That's a lot of money to have to give. But did you know there was a time in America when we gave almost 90% of our money to taxes? Yeah, it's called World War II. It's been that bad before. But anyway, at least that's what I'm told. I wasn't there, just saying. 22. Just ask my 33-year-old daughter. It is. She probably didn't want me to tell you all that. So this is to go to walk. There's these boundaries. I don't know how I got off on all that. We don't charge any extra for it. It's to have conversation. You know what you really got here? These are the boundaries within which we live our lives. It's the totality of our life. When I'm gone, the people who really know me well are going to say that Robert was the guy that was Torah, Torah, Torah. Everything was Torah with Robert. Everything was be observant to the Torah. Am I right? My wife's like, oh, people that don't know much about me, that remember me from back in my younger days, might have a different assessment. But the totality of my life is all about live according to the Torah. Would agree with that. Then it says Malachi. Now that's not an angel. Oh, I hate that this happened to Judaism. I mean, it's okay that it happened to Christianity as far as I'm concerned, but I hate that it happened to Judaism. Malachi is my messenger. It's not my angel. This messenger, as we know from history, was Yehoshua, a man, not an angel who flew around with wings. This was the one that was sent by God. What did they call, for the Christians listening in, and that does happen, people. What did they call the people, what's the Christian? They call them apostles, right? Yeah. Christians call them apostles, but they were called the Shelachim in Hebrew, which comes from Shalach. It's the sent ones. And Malachi, this is the same thing. This is a messenger. This is a prophet. This is a priest. This is a Torah teacher. This is somebody who's sent by God. Where we are now, we're talking about literally about Yehoshua and all who would follow after him. Then it says, Lefanecha. It's the pane. It's the face. For you. It's the part, remember from last time, to turn this way. It's the noun that's indicative of action, which is hard for some people to understand. But this is Hebrew we're talking about, not English. So it's the turn the face from this way to that way, to be before your face. All right. Then it says, Veheviacha, and make come I you, literally, and so I will make you come. It's to arrive, to enter a place. So I'm going to make you get to this place. This word is in something called hefil in Hebrew. Doesn't mean much in English, but it's to cause someone to come in, to lead them. If you've led somebody to a place, you've caused them to arrive at that place. So if I teach you the Torah and you do what I've taught you, that takes you from this place to that place. I've literally caused you to get there, right? Now, if I teach you false things and you wind up in a false place or in a wrong place, in trouble as your teacher, and where you may not even get in trouble as the student going to the wrong place, I will definitely get in trouble as the teacher, because I'm in a position where if I'm leading you somewhere, I'm supposed to be leading you to the right place, not the wrong place. And so teachers are held at a higher standard than the student or just the listener, because not everybody's a student. Just because you tune in on Shabbat, just because you show up on Shabbat and listen and learn and try to apply it, does not mean that you are necessarily a Talmud. You're just a person wanting to learn the law, wanting to live by law, wanting to do what you can to please God and know where you stand in life and not have to worry and wonder. People like that come and they listen and they learn, they apply, and they live their lives. They do not have to become rabbim. They don't have to be rabbis. But the rabbi causes you to arrive at a certain place. And if you follow me at all, you're going to arrive at Torah observance in your life. If you're not in Torah observance, if you don't understand, if you're thinking you don't have to live by the Torah, you are not following my teaching. Let's just put it that way. The next Hebrew word is El. It's a noun indicative of motion. Here we go again. Direction to any place. It's going from the left to the right. Same thing that we just had. Then it says ha-emori. That's the English, they call them Amorites. They were the mountaineers. So you're going to come to those people. Then the Hahiti. English Bible calls them the Hittites. That's the word for terror. Then it says Perizi, the parasites. I don't really know how to pronounce that word. It's kind of parasites. It's villagers. Then it's Veha Kenani. You've heard of Canaanites? There's your word. Ha-Hivi. That's the Hivites. And then it was the chick bites and the chigger bites and the ant bites. Anyway. Then we had the Vehi Hehativ and make cut off him. So now we're at a word here, not he's naming people, right? Because God's going to take them through all these people. There's going to be these battles to get to this land, right? And that's what we're talking about here. So that's how we know it was Yehoshua, Joshua, who led them through all this. So this particular word is tanai, to disown, with the signification of covering over, so hiding. And this idea was partly transferred to that of denying and partly to that of smearing over. So this is not necessarily lying as it is covering. So if you're covering the truth, you're lying, right? But hopefully you get what's going on there. Then it says Veha Yevusi, and they call it Jebusites in English. The trodden down is what it means. So here's what it's really saying. For the messenger will go before you and bring you to the Emori and the Hitti and the Perizi and the Kenani and the Hivi and the Yebusi, and I will cut them off. God will cut them off. Wow, that's pretty awesome. Then it goes on and it says in verse 24, very literally in English, not you shall bow down to gods them, and not you shall serve them, and not you shall do as from deeds them. For tear down you shall tear down them, and crush you shall crush memorials them. This is a whopper here. So it starts off with lo. That's the negative article. So what are we not going to do? Ti shitahave. You shall bow down. So you will not bow down. You will not bow yourself. You will not, it's what you think of. You won't worship. You won't bow down. You could even say you won't even give in. Then it says lelohe him, which is to their gods. You will not bow down to their gods. In this case, they're going to be fake gods. They're idols. You do not bow down to their idols. Now, if their idols are, let's say this is a place where, like Sodom and Gomorrah, that's one of the most misunderstood towns of all time, because it got turned into all this bad stuff. And it was bad, don't get me wrong. What they were doing was bad, but it's not the bad that the English Bible turned it into. The Puritans really messed some things up because they took a wrong track, and it led people to the wrong place. But what they did, it was like watching the Jerry Springer show. Everybody shows up because they like the gotcha moment. They like everybody's arguing with everybody, and then they take the DNA test, and after all, it is your kid, and everybody gets into that. That's the essence of Sodom and Gomorrah. If you watch the what are those called? Soap operas. Now, I haven't seen an actual soap opera since the 70s, and I only watched one like one time, and it was the most horrible thing I ever saw in my life. Everybody arguing and backbiting and backstabbing and all of that. That was Sodom and Gomorrah. It was a thing about a little game my sister and I used to play as we were growing up. You're so low, your feet dangle off the curb. And then I'd come back with, you're so low, you can walk on stilts under the belly of a snake, trying to beat out the other one with the you're so low jokes. That's what Sodom and Gomorrah were like, right? This was that. So if we went to their town and we joined in with their festive games, the "you're so low" thing, trying to hurt somebody, get at them with the words, we've just bowed down to their God. That's their thing. That's their deity. Money, if you go to a place where it's all about the money, you go to Harvard so that when you get out, you get a job as a COO of some, big corporation where you can make trillions of dollars off of the stupidity of, unsuspecting people. You're bowing down to that particular God. This is way more than just the physical bowing down, is what I'm trying to say. Yeah, I don't need to say all that this time. So the next word is velo, and you will not what? Ta'av them. You will not serve them. To labor, to work. Uh, that's where you get the idea more of the, you go to the city where it's all about who can beat each other in a battle of wits. That's Sodom and Gomorrah in a nutshell. It's a battle of wits. You go in, you have the battle of wits, and that's everybody trying to beat everybody at the battle of wits. If you go into a place like that and you join into that battle of wits, you've just served their God. If you go in to a place where everything is set up so that you can make all the money and get it away from everybody else, like our government. I mean, that's kind of what our government has become. They're all about they set up these programs where they're supposed to help people, and then as soon as people file for help, the first thing they do is turn them down. And now we got to play this game, and now we got to go through the appeals process so that maybe, if we're lucky enough, we'll get some money. And so this game that our government makes people play so that they can get the help they need, that's really what our government has become, and they're making us bow down to this God. It's so wrong. This is velo, and you will not ta'aset. You won't do the things that they do. So they're really driving this idea home that you don't give in to other people's gods, whether it's soccer, football, fishing, hunting, money making, cut down fights like what the media likes to do. They're over here on the left saying all these lies about somebody because they want to destroy them, or on the right because they're whatever they're doing there. I don't even know what example I could give for that, but uh, they're really going on about this. We don't become like them. We don't go in and be part of that lifestyle that they live. Then it says, Kema asehen, from their deed. You don't do what they're doing. It's literally what it just said. You don't do what they do. Because you're supposed to be Torah observant. We're living a whole different lifestyle than what they're living. Hares, that's tear down, to pull down, to destroy. Because ultimately that was the idea behind Sodom and Gomorrah. You destroy somebody with words. That was the game. It's literally what they were doing. It wasn't all that other stuff that it turned into. Think of the word Sodom and where that went. It wasn't that at all. It had nothing to do with that. It had everything to do with tearing them down with words, and that's where we are. America has become Sodom and Gomorrah. We really have. We are the epitome of the two cities that had to be destroyed because they were so far gone. Is God going to do that? No. He's already done that. But the people are destroying themselves, that's for sure. Then it says, Teharsem, you shall tear them down. Okay, does this mean that we should join this Antifa group and go and burn down buildings? No. No. No, 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 no. But that is what this word means. It's the tearing down. Then the shaber, and you will crush. You will break them into. It's like throw glass on the ground and make it shatter into pieces. There's your idea. Did I skip a word? No. Where'd it go? Oh, here it is. Ma zevotehem, their memorials. Wow. Doesn't this sound like what's going on? Everyone's running around wanting to destroy all the memorials. You know what? They shouldn't have been there in the first place. We call ourselves one nation under God, and it's supposed to be the God of Israel, right? And so if we were following that God and we were really one nation under that God, we would not have a Statue of Liberty. We would have been gracious about it and just sent it right back to France where it came from. Told them to keep their nonsensical poem at the bottom of that statue in France where it belongs under a socialist country and not in America. I'm just saying, just giving you that one for free. We should have sent it back. There shouldn't have been statues of George Washington and Thomas Jefferson and Hamilton and on down. None of that should have happened. If we were truly one nation under God, we wouldn't have broken his law to make those things, because it is against his law to make those things. So them going in and taking down statues of George Washington because he owned slaves, people. His parents owned slaves, yes. And when they died, they were in debt. And it was against the law for you to sell your slaves, or not sell your slaves, to free your slaves while you were in debt. That's why he had slaves. But guess what he did when he got out of debt? Now they're talking about taking down the memorial of Benjamin Franklin, who never, ever owned slaves. Never. Because these people are just out to destroy things. They don't even care that they wouldn't have the right to have an opinion, let alone live a free life if it weren't for those men. But it starts with one guy who was a criminal against the United States, a Southern general. They were committing crimes against the United States. It starts there where you can, it's kind of understandable, but it doesn't end, does it? Because it's mob violence and mob rule, and it has no place. Now, when God sent his people in, this is because we're not going through the same thing. When God sent his people into this place, they were going to encounter these people, and these people, in some cases, decided to attack Israel. Israel did not attack them, except to the degree that God said, okay, so this group of people are going to attack you at sunrise. You need to counterattack them just before they take off so that you can catch them by surprise and have some shot at winning this war. That kind of thing did happen. It was self-defense. It was never murder. They never, ever engaged in murder. All right, so here's our translation. You shall not bow down to their gods. You shall not serve them. You shall not do according to their deeds. But you will up them down and utterly crush their memorials. And to them as the memorials. You shall crush these memorials. Why? Because they were in their country. So if we did, for some reason, wake up and come to our senses in this nation and decide that we should really honor our covenant that we made with God, George Washington made with God anyway, that we would be one nation under that God and his law, well, then maybe we should probably go in and destroy all that stuff shouldn't be here in the first place. If we do it for those reasons, I'll be on board with it. But doing it because it's mob rule, I'm sorry, I'm not going to jump on that one. All right, other words, not do according to their deeds. Maimonides said that we should not imitate their heathen ways of living. Okay, I agree, but wow, what a weird way to say it. Then of the words, tear them down. Rashi said the idols, not the worshipers. It's a good thing it's pointed out because there was some confusion on that one. Rashi and the Sa'adiyah both felt that the piles of stone that these cultures set up were to be torn down. yes, that would have been part of it because those were their altars where they worshiped their gods. So he is correct about that, or they are both correct. But there was way more to it, obviously, than just that oversimplification. I think we have enough time to get through 25, so let's go there. Literally in English, it says, and serve them, Yahweh guide you and bless, bread you, and water you, and make depart me sickness from midst you. This is a good one. Ba'a vadtam, and serve them. That's that word avodah, the service, the servant, works. It's when you get hired on to work for somebody, you're their servant, right? Because you work for them, you serve at their pleasure. If they want you to do something a stupid way, and you say, "Hey, look, here's a better way to do it," and they say, "No, I want to do it my way." If you're a good servant, you'll do it their way, even though it's stupid. And you won't tell them how stupid it is, because if you do that, you won't be their servant anymore. So anyway, this is for the word of you won't be their servant. Et Yahweh, it's pointing to God, Elohecha, Elohechem, your God. Sorry, I got a whole bunch of information there that's not necessary today. Ulerach, and bless. This is to bend at the knee, to kneel down. The primary notion lies in breaking down. To invoke God, to ask for a blessing, to bless, which is done on bended knee, as Jusinius said. Well, now, a camel, if you think about it, is a person's servant, right? Because you take the camel, you get it to get down on its knees, and then you load stuff on it. Then you get it to stand up, and then you lead this camel to wherever your destination is. When you get there, you bless that camel. You make it lie down on its knees. You take the goods off of it and you distribute it. Maybe you put some of it back. Maybe you put something completely back. Maybe you don't put anything back. But while it's on its knees, you make sure it's refreshed. You give it water and maybe something to nibble down and that kind of thing, right? And this is the idea behind blessing, because there are times when people who serve God and they work very hard in the ministry of God, and that's the word that all Jews are scared of. I'm personally not scared of that word, but in the service of God, right? I was looking for a different word than service, since we're talking about servants. But anyway, there are times in our lives, in our service to God, that God stops us. We're no longer on that journey. We have to stop. That one's come to an end. The burden off of us. He's taking the load off of our shoulders. And in that moment, we're supposed to be refreshed. We're supposed to be recuperating and building back up our strength and all of that. And then when it's time, God will put the load back on us, raise us to our feet, and we'll go back on our journey. And it's the funny part is that's the part where people complain the most. Oh, I'm not doing anything. I need to be doing something. Yes, you need to be refreshing and rebuilding and getting strength. That's why God bends you with the knee, and that's called a blessing. All right, so then the next word is et, so it points to something. Then it's lach mecha, bread you. This is lachem, bread. It's wheat and flour and water, and they mix it together. I have no idea how you make bread, but it's bread. But bread is also used of food. We say things in English that are and they come from the Bible, by the way, where we say, let's get together and break bread. It doesn't mean that we're actually just going to eat bread, right? We may have goulash, we may have hamburgers, we may have whatever, right? And we got together, we had a meal, we called it breaking bread. Well, because that comes from the Bible, lechem is used that same way. So it's not necessarily a bread, but it pretty much always was, because that was the main food for them back in the day. Then it says ve'et memecha. That's from the word for waters. So it's from your waters. Then it says vahasiroti, and make depart me, to turn aside, to go away, to depart. Going to make depart what? Mahala, sicknesses, diseases. It is from the root chala, and it's a sound-alike word, by the way, to be rubbed, to be polished, smooth, whence the ornaments of a woman, so called from polishing, to adorn with a woman's ornament, to be sweet, pleasant. Properly, it's to be smooth. But here's where your real meaning comes: to be worn down in strength, to be infirm, to be sick or diseased. Because when you wear down a rock, what happens to it? It becomes smooth. And so they use this word. Remember, it's a primitive language, so you get a lot of meaning out of a few words. And this is where we're going from this, because if a woman wanted to have a necklace, maybe you get a bunch of different size pebbles out of the river and you rub them down. You make them smooth, right? And so that's, you see where they're getting this same idea. But when you're worn down from hard labor, or worn down from illness, or worn down from the lack of sleep, or whatever it is, sick, you become ill. Then it says mikir becha, and that's from the midst, the middle, your interior. It's used of the bowels because it's the innermost part of you. It's used of the heart and the mind and the bowel, and all that stuff's the same thing in the biblical world. It's not all these different bullet points. So the most deepest part of you, from that place. So your translation becomes, but you shall serve Yahweh your God, and he will bless your bread and your water. Now remember, that's idiomatic. You have to understand that that's to bless your bread and your water is to bless all of your provision. Everything that you need to survive will be blessed. And he will, okay, and make sickness depart from the midst of you. Of the words "bless your bread," the Sephono says the bread will nourish us and will not make us sick. And that's kind of like Christians, they get together and they pray before their meal, not knowing that they did this because a king once told his subjects that they had to separate themselves from everything Jewish. So since the Jews did what the Bible said and bless God after their meals with their hands open and their heads up, the Christians, because of their king, decided to bless not God but theirself, because the Jews said, "Blessed are you, O Lord," and what did the Christians do? It was Catholics, by the way, that eventually the Christians did the same. Instead of their hands out, they pulled them in. Instead of their heads up, they pulled it down. Instead of saying, "Blessed are you, O Lord," they said, "Bless us, O Lord." You see where all this is coming from? And the Sephono sounds like they're following after the Christian thing here. The bread, praying over the bread so God will bless us food to the nourishment of our bodies. And it never had anything to do with that. We were supposed to bless God for all of his provision. Yasuda said the change from plural to singular, which occurs a number of times in these verses, is common in biblical Hebrew, and particular in, is that particular? In poetic style. It breaks the monotony of the often repeated recurrence of the same termination. In other words, you're not supposed to make anything of it's singular, it's plural, it's singular, it's plural. They changed it up because of the monotonous nature of what's being written here. And it had nothing to do with, well, this one's in singular and that one's in, no. It just was a stylistic thing. Of the words "make depart" or "I will take away," Kasuto also said another variation this time is a change of person. In other words, from third to second person, which is also common in poetic dictation. In other words, make something of the text when it goes from third person to second person or third person to first person or what. None of that makes any difference in biblical Hebrew. It has nothing to do with it. That's a totally English thing. It person belongs to the English language, not to the biblical Hebrew. So don't make things out of it. Part of it. All right, we have run out of time, so we will pick up next week with verse 26. Shalom, shalom, y'all.